Hello, my beauty. So, as said last time, today I'm going to talk a bit about autoimmune diseases, mental health, and the relation to spirituality. Of course, life's relation to spirituality would be the same thing. But first of all, I touched last time on the fact that if you were a starseed or an indigo child or one of the many other names that they call interplanetary beings, interplanetary souls that have incarnated on this planet to assist humanity with ascension. These souls are more likely to endure an autoimmune disorder. So autoimmune disorders come in lots of different shapes and sizes, and some of them are easily detectable. Some of them, a lot of autoimmune diseases end up being neurological. So an example of a neurological autoimmune disease is, chronic fatigue syndrome, or MAE, fibromyalgia, thyroid disease, usually glandular diseases. So that's anything with the endocrine system where it starts to break down and malfunction. Then you have motor neurons disease. You have, there's many of them. I'm trying to think of the other one. There's one that's got very similar symptoms to the fibromyalgia, which is I had it and then it's gone. Not a good day for memory for me. That's part of, ironically, that's part of the MS is the one I was trying to think of. So MS, multiple sclerosis, is another autoimmune disease. And funnily enough, multiple sclerosis, if you have a look at the symptoms of multiple sclerosis, they are very similar to the symptoms of fibromyalgia, including memory issues. And in fact, I was tested for that before I found out, before we had to default. You default with your diagnosis with a lot of these disorders because they don't show up in bloods. They don't show up as inflammation. They don't show in any substantial neurological way that can be relied upon. So therefore, so you might go in and you might be having a good day, and then you do your little hold your hands out straight and all those neurological tests, and they don't show up there. But then the next day you fall over because you lose your balance or whatever. So they're sporadic, they're not sort of consistent. And I know with MS, when they were testing me for MS, they said that if I had MS, then it would show up on an MRI scan. And so because that will multiple sclerosis damages the neuropathways, whereas fibromyalgia doesn't do any permanent damage but malfunctions. Now, when I spoke to the doctor, I will focus mainly on the neurological and autoimmune disorders that I'm most familiar with. But it can be applied across all autoimmune diseases in relation to how it relates to spirituality and how you can protect yourself from that. So with the, for example, let's take fibromyalgia. It is a very widespreading disorder, and a very similar disorder, very similar symptoms. You've got celiacs and you've got all those other ones, but and POTS and Crohn's is another one, and you often find in individuals that if you have one autoimmune disease, then it can often follow. And I was told by the neurologist when I was diagnosed that the relation to my autoimmune disease with my thyroid, because I had Graves' disease, she said, yeah, well, you know what caused that? That's your thyroid disease that's caused that. So, I mean, obviously that was just her sort of how she relayed it to me, but what she's really saying is there is a link between thyroid disease and ending up with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and fibromyalgia, as a secondary thing. So anyway, obviously I'm not a doctor, I am not medically trained in any way, so this is just my discoveries and my knowledge on what I have found the link between these disorders, whilst investigating them and researching them, learning about them as and when I developed the symptoms, and the diagnosis is coming in, so therefore I would look into it. But I remember, for instance, when I first looked into chronic fatigue syndrome, which, well, I mean, this is another thing, isn't it? Because, you know, these things are called sort of different things. ME was what it was known as. Don't ask me to say the full word. Not many ME sufferers do know the full word because it's one of those mycellular ones of those. So, but the ME disorder, when I first looked into it, was I read an article and it said, I think this was in the States. Okay, so I couldn't even find anything on the UK figures, the UK statistics. So that says quite a bit about the UK and how they view it, how they did at that time, which was around between 2007 and 2010. The first figures for the US that I read were around 200,000 cases. I would say by about 10 years past that date, it had increased to 250,000 cases in the US. So it was obviously a growing problem that was really not having any investment in it. There were many medics that denied that it exists, that it was some kind of psychosomatic disorder, because they couldn't see it in a blood test. Which at the time I thought, well, you know, you've only known about hormones in the last 100 years. And what did you think there were before that? Oh, well, it's nothing. Oh, no, actually, we've just found, you know, this hormone in a blood. So yeah, I mean, this is another example of the sort of this, I don't know whether to call it patriarchal, but it's certainly rigid, isn't it, in thinking that, you know, oh, if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. If I can't see it, if I haven't seen it, you know, then I'm completely closed-minded to it, which is kind of sort of harps back to what I was saying last time about this very sort of stuck, obstinate, you know, energy from the draconian energy, sorry. So yeah, very, very stuck and very, very sort of small-minded, narrow-minded, closed-minded attitude towards something that they really couldn't possibly state that they knew all there is to know. So now there's lots of theories and no scientific solid proof. Now, scientific methods require something to be done over and over again, about 5 times, and get the exact same results. So if you are able to do that, then they are confident that is the cause, that is the answer. But if you get varying results from a set of experiments, then it can't be pinned down. And of course, the human body, and even if you have a sort of similar DNA structure, then you've still got very different personalities within those structures to bear in mind. So it's very, you know, we are, I mean, you know, it's unarguable that we are all very individual. So finding cures and treatments for any human is always a bit of a feat. And this is why Big Pharma has this huge industry, because it isn't black and white or one size fits all. So with those various, I think it's very interesting to point out that now I was supposed to do my research here, but her name is Dr. Astrid something Burger. sorry about this, just useless, aren't I, with names? But yeah, let's just call her Dr. Astrid. She is an insider from CERN, which is, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but basically it's a very high level genetic investigations and experiments and scientific studies based on various different genetic things, which there is a lot of things going on in those laboratories that are top secret, that are very, very recently, more recently being leaked out, that kind of really indicate the level of experimentation, the level of knowledge that the governments have on interdimensional realms, other dimensions. Now, she spoke to two insiders at CERN, about an experiment that they were doing, and they were sitting around a table in front of one of the CERN devices that is said to open portals to other dimensions. So, and they were sat waiting, and they said that there would be an entity that would come through the portal and come and sit and talk to them, which is kind of exciting and mind-blowing. I suppose it does depend on what this entity, what his or hers motives are, but that's the level of investigations and knowledge that they have at CERN about interdimensional beings and other dimensions. Anyway, quantum physics is obviously really catching up with the spiritual world. Now, she also stated that she had been talking with other scientists, and it was said, and she agreed, that it was gossip, so it was obviously not verified, but the Epstein-Barr virus was in fact commissioned by Epstein. Now, this is where it links in. The Epstein-Barr virus is a virus, and it can be treated, I believe, although a lot of viruses have to, you know, the best treatment is your own autoimmune system kicking in. But the Epstein-Barr virus was said to have been linked to ME and chronic fatigue syndrome. So it was said that they had these disorders, they had these viruses, some of them tested positive for the Epstein-Barr virus, then went on to have long COVID type disorder, you know, symptoms that they couldn't shift and they couldn't get rid of, and then they went on to be diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, and also they also call it I think it's post-viral fatigue syndrome. I think that's probably it. Now, of course, not all of us get those tests. This was probably done in America, and so our NHS just wouldn't fund something like that. They just said, oh, you got a virus, off your pop. Plenty of fluids. But there we have a link to a virus that is rumoured to have been commissioned by Epstein, that goes on to cause these neurological disorders, autoimmune disorders and neurological disorders. So I don't know if you've made the link, but of course, well, I mean, I mentioned the link, of course, long COVID was a virus that took, I mean, sometimes took weeks to get rid of the symptoms, and then after that, the malaise that a lot of people endured. Some people were bedbound afterwards and have never recovered. There is a big case in the UK where a newscaster, her husband contracted it, ended up in hospital, and never came out of a sort of a vegetative state. I think he was just about able to improve with his speech, but he really couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything, and he eventually passed, I think, about 4 or 5 years later. We're now in the 6th year. So there we have an example of extreme neurological damage to this individual. But so on the lower scale, you have the neurological malfunctioning, and then on the larger scale, you have, you know, the damage that's causing this person to be unable to even function, talk, anything, feed themselves, anything. And nothing helps. And then you've got also the rumours. Well, we can't call them anything more than rumours because it's never been, nobody's ever fessed up to it. But it was widely talked about that this COVID was a biological weapon created in a laboratory. It was linked back to Wuhan, wasn't it, in China. I mean, you know, lots of theories. But there, again, we have this rumour that the COVID virus was biological warfare and was dropped from a, you know, created in a laboratory, dropped into the population, spread, which would have been engineered to do, and mutate, spread like wildfire. And in fact, the Epstein files disclose information between, I think it's Bill Gates and Epstein and others, about planning a pandemic. And I think David Icke mentions sort of problem solution sanction. So there you have, the problem is, oh, we've just invented this, right, let's just drop it in like a little nuclear bomb onto the world. There you've got the problem. The solution is vaccinate, control people, control people's movements, control what they are doing. In the vaccination, we can slip in this, that and the other, because really we would prefer as many people to die off as possible because they're a lot more easier to control if there's lower numbers. And then you are left with these sufferers of chronic fatigue, and then you're in a state of weakness. You're not able to fight, are you? It's like fight or flight, or just go off to sleep, or fight or flight, or just flop on the floor with no, your muscles disappear when you have chronic fatigue, so you don't have any strength. And it makes for, as well as keeping everybody in a state of panic, a state of survival, nobody can make their next planned move. Nobody can sit down around a table and talk about, right, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? Right, I think we need to get it. Ooh, clear head. Ooh. You can't do that if you are in survival mode. You are limping from day to day. You're exhausted. You're getting out of bed. You're trying to get to your work so you can earn money to pay your bills. And then it's, you know, it's not something that you can, you know, you're not your strongest when you're in survival mode. You are simply just trying to survive. So I think it's just interesting to raise those two things. Now, I think at the time there were people who were anti-vaxxers, you know, don't do this. It's this, you know, all vaccines go through this long, lengthy testing. The vaccines haven't been through that. They had a feeling. They just had a feeling. Now, obviously, the people that did take it, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you all right? If you're all right, then there's nothing to worry about, is there? So there's no point in sort of crying over spilt milk. Would you have it again? Probably not. Probably not. Probably off vaccines now. Made a lot of people feel grotty, which is one of the reasons why I didn't, because I understood that there was you know, there was side effects of feeling ill. With all the side effects from long COVID, which I had it in 2 different forms. I had my ME coming at me, I had my fibromyalgia coming at me, and I thought, do I want to take an injection that is going to make me feel even worse than I already do with all those symptoms, plus the fact that I've already had COVID, probably different types of COVID, maybe not like, who knows whether I had 19 or not. I believed I'd had 19. I'd recovered from it and I'd moved on before lockdown anyway. And prior to that, I'd had a lot of COVID type germs. And I do believe that's where they're trying to cook up these nice COVID viruses, trying to find one that's really going to get the pandemic going. And I think they were releasing them and they were dying out. And then COVID, they were like, right, well, let's just ramp this one up anyway, fudge the figures and all the rest of it. So I don't believe that the pandemic was anything like it was suggested. I think it was a nasty cold. I don't believe the figures that were put out. I know that there are funeral directors that have said that they were that in the period that they were there were no more deaths due to no more deaths than usual, and that if they said, well, no, he did have a heart attack, and they were like, yes, but did he test positive for COVID? Well, he did, but he had a heart attack. That's not, no, everything's COVID. And then towards the end, it was just like, so just put that down as COVID. Just put more down as COVID. And he obviously, was a bit outraged by it. He also said that after the vaccines went out, when he was embalming, he was experiencing from specifically COVID vaccinated people, he was experiencing long squid-like wormy things, clots, white clots in their intestines when he was doing the embalming process. And he said that guaranteed, if he pulled out one of these things that he'd never seen it, and been a family funeral director for all his life and had never ever seen these things, and then suddenly vaccinated people were dying and coming in with these. Anyway, and as you may be aware, then you've got the Bill Gates trial that's been going on in the Netherlands, whether it's a criminal trial. I don't think it's criminal. He's been sued, I think. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, but I know it's going on. And anyway, any pressure on that man is going to be of a benefit, because he basically wiped out millions with his plan for a pandemic. Anyway, so getting back to chronic fatigue, the autoimmune disorders. There is many autoimmune disorders where you feel exhausted and you feel tired and you feel drained. Now, concentrating on the fibromyalgia, there is a strong link with fibromyalgia, these types of disorders. What I was told by the doctor was, and this is a doctor at Great Ormond Street Hospital who runs the chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia clinic there, because they're not that widespread and they're not that effective. And I think in the US and Canada that they'll just sort of give you morphine, give you different things to just try and get you to kill the pain. Whereas in the UK, they tend not to give you anything at all, really, other than a load of very sort of damaging nerve inhibitors, or various other drugs that don't really do a lot. Although there is a couple of drugs that have come out and they are quite effective, and a lot of people find them effective. In fact, one of them I take, and I find that effective. For the pain, not always, but for the every single day racking pain, yes, it is effective. Although you can have a relapse at any time and it can take over. So, moving into causes for those things. Now, the doctor said to me, right, I need to know, and he asked a series of questions, and the questions are, he said that the commonalities between between these types of disorders are that, obviously he didn't mention that you're a starseed. That's just me mentioning that. Don't think doctor would have said anything about being a starseed, but you never know. But there we have it. They have individuals that have high standards. So they said high achievers. So he said high standards, and I can't why. I have very high standards of myself. Yes. And I analyse, anything I would do to make sure it was the right thing beforehand, and then afterwards, was that right? Yes. If anyone was moaning about it, oh, you did this, I'd be like, did I? Whereas a lot of people don't, do they? They just go, you, and they chuck it back at you. Whereas I don't. I go, oh, okay, let me think about that. No, I don't think you're right there. I really don't. Or, oh, okay, you could be right there. But I'm very careful in analysing my own growth and behaviour, and so in that instance, yes, I do have high standards. He also said, oh, you're a high achiever, and I thought, what? At the time, stay-at-home mum for twins. And anyway, he said, what are you doing this or you doing that? At the time, I'd just done a course on counselling and few other bits and bobs. He was like, see, you're a high achiever. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm a high achiever. Anyway, and I suppose, compared to some, I could be viewed as having, high achievements. To others, I'll be like, oh, no, she's not very high achiever. But, when I described or got asked the questions about my life and what I was doing and whatever, the doctor deemed me a high achiever. Then he said, so yeah, high achievers, perfectionism, or very, very high standards. A people pleaser, I think, is one of them. So, you put other people first. And that sort of ties in with my, oh, well, hang on a minute, have I done something wrong? Oh my God, like this person's upset, it must be my fault. Let me just check back. Would hate to think I haven't pleased that person. And although that's something that people pleasers have to work on throughout their life, I have worked considerably on myself being a people pleaser, and I've come quite a long way, I'll have you know. So, and there were other bits and bobs, but basically, that although he couldn't come up with any cause, obviously there's these said triggers, viruses that seem to affect your nervous system. Stress. So, now it can either be mental stress, emotional stress, physical stress. So as a little example, one time I triggered an ME thing by cutting, this was some years ago, I couldn't do that now, I have a robot lawnmower now. But at the time, it was 30 degrees out. This is like a fair few years ago, before the UK really had 30 degrees very often. And so it's 30 degrees, and I cut the grass. Not a massive garden either, but just, and that was it. Next day in bed. And then sort of, before an exam or before a new job or something, anything like that, very, very sort of anxious or, stressed or worrying about anything, then it would bring it on. So yeah, physical exertion, mental exertion if you are, down to even socialising. So if you're sat and you're chatting for a few hours, it exhausts you. So you really do have to limit your socialising, because you can have a relaxed conversation at home with your children, whatever, that's not a problem. But presenting to someone who you are not around all of the time and feeling like you've got to be on the ball and share everything and talk to them and listen to them and have them tell you this, that and the other, and yeah, so socialising. And that's taking out of the equation any sort of late nights or consumption of anything, let's say. It's really exhausting. So yes, they are the triggers. But how this ties into spirituality is one of the most effective stress relief or stress relievers I have managed to use is to connect with my higher self. And that's where meditation comes in, just connecting with your guides, connecting with your higher self, taking yourself out of 3D world and just ascending for those few minutes, just being in that space. Positivity, since I have sidestepped triggers to, let's say, somebody's a bit of a button pusher and they're trying to push your buttons to get you into an argument. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? Even if it's just because someone's driven into a parking space and that other person just didn't like it, that you took the parking space that they wanted. So button pushers, and you end up in a learning to step back from those sort of triggers. General ascension, moving into a state of ascension and spending time on a higher plane. Positivity, remembering that if somebody is grumpy or making a sort of negative gesture towards you, that's a reflection of them and not you. Then obviously it is forgiveness for them doing it. Forgive them for, using you as a punch bag. Well, they don't realise what they're doing, or they're doing it, but, they clearly haven't got that control over them. They, it's like, I must get this out. Maybe they've learned that in, growing up, or in their personality. They think that, taking it out on someone else is the thing to do. And all of those things that you can do. Obviously, you have to be careful with the exercise, but there is a pacing thing. So it's a bit like when you get in the pool and you do a length and you can't breathe, can you? But then on the way back, it starts to get easier. And that's it. It's like build up. Addressing anxiety, getting to the bottom of anxiety. Really important, really, really important for staying well, with an autoimmune disorder. And I always think one of the best ways to do that is to take it to the worst case scenario, because that's what you're probably worrying about. Oh, what if I go out the door and I get run over by a bus? Now you think to yourself, oh no, I'm not worried about getting run over. But when you actually break it down, if you sat down and wrote out all the things that you're worrying about that stops you getting out of the house, you will find that it will be an extreme thing that you think is going to happen. And even if that extreme thing happens, then you've got to put yourself into a position where you go, well, I'd still be okay, I'd still be alive. Or if it's death, right, well, I'll be dead then, I won't have to worry about it. So it's about really taking yourself all the way to every scenario and not sitting in that bottom card going, oh my God, I'll be dead. Oh my God, that's awful. I'll be dead. I'll be dead. No, take it beyond that worst case scenario. Well, what if I am? What if I am? How will I get out of that? How will I learn from that? How will I, and being dead, obviously, if you believe in an afterlife, fantastic. You're off to your welcome back home party. So brilliant. Well, what about my children? Well, if this was my time to go, if this was my date that I'd agreed with my soul contract, they will have known that anyway. So therefore, there's something for them to learn from this circumstance. So problem solved. So what we do is we don't do that. We sit quite often in our anxiety. Now, another thing that we can be anchored into a stressful situation is relationships. So that's any kind of relationship, a partner relationship, a parent relationship, brother-sister relationship. Those relationships that, here comes the button pusher, here comes the person that, is wanting a rise out of me, is wanting a reaction. They're feeding off the negativity of your reaction. So all we can really do there, again, is to work towards not reacting. Now, if we find ourselves in that situation and we are always reacting and they are severe and we cannot but react to them, then we have to think seriously about whether we still include them in our lives. Now that is the ultimate, isn't it? When you're coming down to that bottom card, do I shut that person out of my life? Well, it's up to you. Do you want to continue with the button pushing that causes you to have to lay down for the rest of the day, that causes you to have a relapse the following day and means you can't socialise, you can't do anything, sends you back down the hospital? And that's, I think, where we lock ourselves into relationships. We lock ourselves into that feeling of, I can't quit. They can quit, but I can't quit. I have to continue in this relationship. And we've all been there. But there you have the option. You have that choice that you have made. You have made that choice to stay. And sometimes relationships are so detrimental to your health that you have no option. You only get this life. I mean, obviously, if you're reincarnated, you get plenty of lives, but you have to make the best of each life that you're given. And in this life, if you are allowing that to happen and you're going round in a circle each time and it keeps happening and you can't change it and you can't work out how to, then you're not getting through to that person. Or you find you struggle to communicate with that person, or they don't listen, or whatever it is. That is when you have to make that choice. Is this healthy for me? Is this something that I can sustain? And you are well within your rights to step out of the ring and say, no more. I can't. I love you. I don't wish you any ill, but I cannot be around you because you are causing me to feel too bad. It's too much and I can't afford with my illness to be in that position. So again, life is a choice, and especially if you have an illness, then you do have to sometimes make those ultimatums or those decisions. But thinking that you will change them is a bit of a fantasy, and therefore it's always worth remembering that the easiest thing to change is you. The easiest thing to do is to see what you can do to eliminate the stress in your life. So that's a little bit about autoimmune. But what I do want to talk about is there was once a question about, can you still ascend if you're depressed? Well, can you still, of course, ascension is the best way out of depression, but spirituality is not just for the positive. Spirituality can be accessed by anybody in any state of mind. So if you are feeling depressed, if you're on antidepressants, if you feel anxious, it's the positive aspects of spirituality are very, very favourable for those states of mind. And being depressed and being anxious and low shouldn't deter you from trying to develop spirituality. And if you think about it, these individuals, there's people out there that practice Satanism and Luciferianism, and they must be pretty depressed, mightn't they? I would suggest they're pretty depressed, they're pretty low. They possibly don't have great self-esteem because they're seeing themselves as not good enough for the good. Therefore, let's be bad enough for the bad. And it's a polarity that they've chosen because they sought not to, they didn't feel good enough to be good. They felt they were falling off the wagon and they couldn't achieve greatness in that realm. So they have to descend to the lower frequencies. Well, I could probably get there. Let's see if I can get the best at being bad. And there is an echo in society of that. There is a type of person that they say, we always used to say, and we used to hear it, that criminals and police officers are very similar beings. And you either become a criminal or you become a police officer. So that's a little sort of comparison that you might draw. They're similar beings, but one's choosing the light and one's choosing the dark. Well, having said that, one choosing the light, yeah, the current, the Met Police are absolutely, I'm in London, so the Met Police are absolutely outrageous. There's nothing light about the work there. It's corrupt, incredibly corrupt. It's racist, homophobic, and like every prejudice you can imagine. Sexist, homophobic, racist. This was deemed by a really lovely lady, actually. She's lovely. And she wrote a report on the Met, the Casey report, Louise Casey. Really, really lovely lady, and funny too, really funny. But she did an investigation into the Met and found that it was, all of those things. So not much light work there, is there? But the principle is to do good, do good for the community, take criminals out and off the streets, which they're not doing. They're just actually, some of them are even going to the streets and taking women out and killing them and burying them in the fields, as we know about those cases too. Or Woods, Rain Cousins, wasn't it? So spirituality and knowing that there is a higher power, that there, even with the, we can talk about light and dark, we can talk about good and bad, but the reality is Earth is an experience of polarities. Duality is Earth, and that is how we can advance our souls, progression, and grow as souls by experiencing that polarity. We have reached the point where it's out of balance, it's out of whack, and that has come from the Catholic Church had a big hand in it, because they demonized women, and but that was part of the social climate at the time when they were forming the Catholic Christianity. Nothing to do with Christ at all, really. I mean, there's some teachings in there, and there's some little gems in there, but there were so many things in the Bible, written into the Bible, about stoning people that didn't have a white pot for their water, or all these silly things. That's not true, obviously. I just can't remember what they are, but lots of silly things that were written into the Bible that some people really still believe in now. And there's that really good clip where someone says, "Oh, I think it could be I think it's in a film, so it's not a real life. It's a scene in a film, but." Someone says about the Bible and gets sanctimonious on I think it could be a politician, and then he says, "Oh, what about the fact that and just strings off that you can't cross the bridge with your sheep on a Friday," but he didn't say that. He used really sort of like dark examples of what we don't do today, what we understand is wrong today. So I think it was you probably know what I'm talking about. It's a homophobic thing, I think, where she was preaching the Bible and saying, that gay people can't possibly be doing this. Bible says no, and it's like, right, well, Bible always says something really silly about this, that, and the other. Or barbaric about this, that, and the other. Is that right? Still believe in that? So you're taking it word for word, and that's ridiculous. Anyway, but so I've talked a little bit about autoimmune disorders and how spirituality can help, but there is more to come, so I may do part 2 at some point. But at the moment, I think I've rambled on enough. So, if you have anything you would like me to cover, or if you have anything that you'd like to suggest about what I've said so far, then please do give me a shout. My website is https www.srgsoulguidance.com. autoimmuneatlantic.com. So have a good week, and my unconditional love to you. Mwah.
Atlantis Pride.
Sean, you be doing too much.